Pioneering Lascars of 18th and 19th centuries Mauritius. I request Mr. Assad Bhuglah, the author, please stand up and receive officially once again all the guests. Diplomatic Corps. I'm thankful to all the members of Diplomatic Corps. مرحبا بكم أي واحد منكم خوش آمدید. Ladies and gentlemen, today's evening is very historic, not only because after a long period of COVID we are gathered here, but also because this is a historic book which is going to be an enriching addition to our libraries, and it will be a great addition for the future researchers of this island and anyone who wants to study and research about this beautiful island and the history of people who came here. Without going further and deeper and going inside the book, because I will leave that things and those things for the rest of speakers, I would just comment on the book cover. The book cover says, Gassy Sobdar. So we might say in Creole accent, we might say Gassy. But as to my understanding, this is also an Arabic word which is commonly used in Persian and in Urdu from the word Ghazi. Is that correct? Thank you, sir. So Sobdar is not only a name, it is also a title given to many people while they are working in the governmental and non-governmental organizations worldwide. And it's commonly used in British India and even Pakistan today. I would now officially give the power of this mic to Mr. Finlay Salis, who is the master of ceremony today, and he's a journalist and animator. Mic is all yours, and an active audience is with you. Thank you.
Monsieur le vice-président de la République et du Bois-Saison, Madame Jeewa-Daureeawoo, ministre de l'Intégration sociale, de la Sécurité sociale et de la Solidarité nationale, Anna Rochnou, le vice-premier ministre, et Kassam Youtib, ancien président de la République. Aussi bien dans la salle, vous n'allez pas rater et commettre un impair diplomatique, notre ami Raoul Benden, qui a été vice-président. C'est dire le parterre du beau linge qu'on a ce soir pour le lancement du livre de notre ami Assad Bhuglah, le lancement de Gassy Sobdar and the Pioneering Lascars of the 18th and the 19th century. J'ai fait la connaissance de notre ami Assad depuis quelques années déjà, quand j'avais appris qu'il avait, sa première publication était Trade Negotiating Techniques for Small Island Development States pour le compte de UNDP. On peut dire que depuis cette première publication, il a fait l'école buissonnière pour nous publier pas moins de 5 ouvrages. Idriss Goumani, aussi en version théâtrale, Bandari, Akika, Love Beyond the Ocean et le dernier Gassy Sobdar. Il est évident que je ne peux pas m'empêcher de commenter, disons, quand on voit la liste d'ouvrages publiés par notre ami Assad Bhuglah, de revenir un peu sur ce thème qui a fait débat depuis de nombreuses années, l'ethnicisation de la littérature. Il semblerait que les Franco-Mauriciens ont leur panthéon, les Sino-Mauriciens pareil, ainsi que d'autres communautés, et on aurait pu être frileux en ombrage de cette exclusivité. Mais je crois que je dois rendre hommage à Assad Bhuglah. Grâce à ce livre, j'ai appris beaucoup de choses, non seulement les traditions musulmanes, de choses dans Akika ou Bandari. Bon, Bandari m'a pas beaucoup appris, bien évidemment, pour des raisons évidentes, mais sur les autres ouvrages, oui, et surtout aussi Gassy Sobdar, aussi bien que sur le docteur Idriss Goumani. Dieu sait, s'il n'avait pas écrit, peut-être la jeune génération n'aurait pas appris autant de choses sur ces grandes figures musulmanes du passé, et je crois que cela mérite bien évidemment des applaudissements. Et j'ai cru comprendre que son prochain ouvrage sera consacré à Sandy Diomaye, qui n'est autre que le grand-père de notre ami Jeewa-Daureeawoo, bien évidemment. J'ai eu l'honneur de connaître Jeewa, mais pas son grand-père. Hein? Bon, j'espère que le livre nous éclairera sur ce qu'il a fait pour le pays. Voilà pour l'essentiel de ce que j'avais à dire. Et là, j'appelle tout de suite l'auteur, Assad Bhuglah, pour situer un peu le contexte de ce lancement. Assad?
His Excellency, Mr. Eddie Boissison, Vice President of the Republic of Mauritius, His Excellency Mr. Kassem Okin, former President of the Republic, Honorable Dr. Anwar Hasnoon, Vice Prime Minister, Honorable Mrs. Fazila Jeewa-Daureeawoo, Minister of Social Integration, Social Security and National Solidarity, His Excellency Mr. Rao Bandan, former Vice President, Honorable Members of the National Assembly, Mr. Karimji, MD of the Karimji Jiwanji Limited, members of Diplomatic Corps, my good friend Mr. Philippe Sales, descendants of Gassy Sobdar, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening and Assalamu alaikum. I thank you all for having kindly responded to my invitation to the launch ceremony of my book, Gassy Sobdar and Pioneering Lascar of Mauritius. Indeed, you have made a great effort in coming here, taking into account the scary health concern outside due to COVID. I'm very honored by your presence, which I must say is a good sign of vitality that exists in our country. I thank Petrosmoke Library and the Hennessy Park Hotel for having organized this event. Petrosmoke Library is playing a primordial role in promoting arts and culture by generously providing a platform to the authors and artists. I recognize among this gathering presence of few guests who have traveled from Paris and Istanbul to witness the launch of this book, maybe Mr. Ahmad Kamal from Turkey, Mr. Samir Imri and his dad from Paris. I also recognize Dr. Jeewa-Daureeawoo, Senior Advisor to Prime Minister, Mr. Samad Serali, Chairman of ICC, Mr. Cesar I'm a chairman of Urdu Speaking Union. My friend Anwar Zunas is coming. My college friend Rafiq Karim was my class mate also, and vice president of Juma Mosque. Mrs. Ranjita Banwari, president of Indian Diaspora Initiative. Mr. Kwang Hung, a prominent member of Chinese diaspora. Ambassador Azad Doman, a rare rescapé of Omani diaspora. And Mr. Afzal Hussain, who is here. He is very active on the platform of Rendia, 30,000 members, and is promoting the history and culture of Rendia. I do not want to make a long speech. I just want to make a few brief comments on the book. The underlying idea is about the early immigrants who laid the foundation of Mauritius. This includes the Lascars of the 18th and 19th centuries. While exploring the life of Gassy Sobdar, we get the opportunity to discover known and unknown things about our history, our society, and the legacy left behind by our ancestors. Migration is always a painful process. It is associated with déracinement, uprooting, and you are deculturalized. You are away from your loved ones. And maybe today, migration is still an ongoing process. With WhatsApp and social media, we don't feel this distance. But imagine in the 18th and 19th century, when those immigrants came to Mauritius, how painful it was for them, and how they had to restart their life from scratch. And the only means of communication at that time was maritime transport. Once they were brought on this island, they were condemned to set their anchor here. It is against this backdrop that the early Lascars had to settle on this island and form a society. And when you form a society, it is very important to have a family. And if you want to set a family, you have to look for a spouse. And at that time, female population was very meager. And they had to marry, and they had to marry outside their cultural group. And this had benefits and also disadvantages in the sense that there was a risk of losing their cultural identity. But in spite of that, they have been able to maintain the essence of their culture. And as you know, they were even able to build the first mosque at the time when the only culture or religion that was dominant and allowed was what the French colonial masters wanted. The next point I want to highlight about my book is when you're migrants, and this applies to anywhere in the world, you are motivated by the instinct of survival. You have to survive. Either you perish or you progress. And you will note that there is a high rate of social mobility. And in a matter of one generation, you will note that the Lascars made a vertical social mobility to the extent that they were declared Lascar propriétaire by the French authorities, just to tell you to what extent they made progress. And it will be too long to go into details, but I will mention a few families. The Dina family became pioneer in getting involved in regional trade by importing cattle from Madagascar. They were essentially Lascar seamen, but they diversified. And another important dimension of the Dina family is that they produce engineers. And one of the Dina had direct link with the Maharaja of Lahore. And for succession reason, he knew he would not be able to become prince. He came to Mauritius and he married the daughter of Gassy Sobdar. And Farid Dina was among the first engineer of Mauritius. And when we speak of expatriate working abroad, I think he was the first one working in Mozambique, Madagascar, Uganda, Algeria, Sri Lanka, and India in the railway line. And he married Mergita de Grenoble, just as Gassy Sobdar, he married Dessénédé. Now, Dina's two sons, they were also railway engineer, and one of them, Assad Dina, if you go to Google, you will find him. His life was quite hectic. Chateau d'Avignon in Geneva is his emblem. And his another brother, Ali Dina, they say that he was very bright, very intelligent, but he was a lunatic. Because he had futuristic ideas. At the time when Wright brothers had not invented aeroplane, as we know in Mauritius, the first commercial plane, I think the grandfather of Karim Karimji, he started from Mosazi to Rainham Island. But we are speaking of 1819 when people haven't heard of aeroplanes, and he says that he is going to make people fly by balloon gas from Paris to Mauritius. This is science fiction. Then he said he is going to make railway run by coal. And you know, electricity was invented by Acha brothers in 1903. And in 1890, people haven't heard about electricity. He said he is going to make it. He said he is mad. And he finished his time in mental hospital. Finally, electricity, train with electricity was invented, was introduced in Mauritius very recently, Metro Express. Now, if I keep on describing few things about the family, like Kassim brothers, he was young. He wanted to have adventure. He knew that Mauritius was a country where it is a bit of a liberal kind of life. And at that time, you don't need visa. You just need a contact. He had a contact with the Sakir. The Sakir was the Sarang. Sarang means the one who is in charge of ship or the port. He just jumped into the ship. He was a Jeewa-Daureeawoo in Bombay. He came with bags of gold. And what he did, he bought below sugar estate. Then we have my good friend, Bhuglah. He did not know that his ancestor had a piece of land opposite Al-Aqsa Masjid. And they came here because their ancestors are from Sri Lanka. Ceylon, Kandy province. And the Prince of Kandy was persecuted by the British and he was hanged. And many of them fled. Among them was one Bhuglah. He came to Mauritius and settled in Pioneering Lascar, and in 1810, when the British took over, they were so afraid, they left Maurice and they retreated to Washington. I'm not going to narrate the entire story, maybe over a cup of tea next time. Okay. We have also Lascar from African origin. One of them is Ledo. And Ledo, they were having sand quarry. Now, I think I don't want to go in the technical matters of my book, but one important thing is that in all this social mobility, it was education that played important role. And you can imagine how they climbed the social ladder. And they were, to some extent, very literate, those Lascar. Could you imagine at that time, when a young boy had to marry, he had to write a formal letter to the daughter of the father. And it should be in a very good French of Molière, okay? And he has to employ a calligrapher to write it. And at that time, there was no color print. It has to be colored by hand, and artists have to make that card. I'm just giving you a few things like that so that you know what is about the book. Apart from Gassy, there are other families also. Now let me place on a record names of some persons who helped me to realize this book. I recognize Reza Gassy, who constantly reminded me of his request to write a book on his ancestry. I got the technical support of his superb team, Miss Shifa Ubey Khan for typing, she's not here, Miss Nasrin Bano Asik for the cover design and various paintings, Mr. Azhar Masudi for the layout and graphic design. I was also assisted by two senior persons, but very young spirited, in the review of my manuscript. Mr. Samsumudi, who is present among us, despite his advanced age, 90 plus some. Mr. Mumtaz Emri, who is also of the same group, who is based in Canada. The printing of this book has been possible thanks to the sponsorship of the Karim company. Mr. Bashir Karimji, currently on mission abroad, he regrets that he's missing this month. I really appreciate that Mr. Karimji is amongst us. Thank you, Karimji Group, for once again supporting me in initiatives related to the promotion and preservation of cultural and historical heritage. Karim Bhai, please convey my thanks to Bashir Bhai and to Mr. Anil Karimji. In case I have missed any names, I have surely acknowledged them in my book. Thank you to Ahir Bhuglah, Farhad Ramjan, and Umar Malik for all the support of me. My special thanks to Phyllis Sales and all the friends of media. And also thanks to Hennessy Park and Petrosmoke Library once again. Writing this book has taken me long hours of work and very often disturbing the night sleep of my wife. I'm thankful to her for all the sleepless nights. I thank you for your kindness.
I'm delighted, first and foremost, I'm delighted to be here. It is Indeed, a great pleasure to see so many of you here to recognize the effort, the ability, the literary ability of our good friend, Mr. Assad Bhuglah. Mr. Bhuglah has always had a fascination with personalities of the past. The present book we are launching today looks at the history of the Muslim community in Mauritius and their meaningful contribution to our country's development. Mr. Bhuglah writing a book, especially a book on history, is very meaningful to us. If we do not look back to the past, we will never reach the future to which we aspire. I have personally had the opportunity to be present for the launch of several other books by Mr. Bhuglah, including Dr. Idris Gumani, Bandari, and Akika. You have indeed become one of the prominent names of Mauritian literature. It is remarkable to see that through your writing, you have made an immense contribution to promoting Muslim culture as well as the beautiful diversity that is inherent to Mauritius. Your writing always takes readers on a journey of discovery of Muslim history, culture, geography, folklore, and also traditions. The present books provide us with a significant window of the key personalities of our country's history. Indeed, going down memory lane and finding the achievements of Muslims in various fields is sometimes important, essential. The launch of the present book is an important occasion for Mauritian heritage. As the title of the book indicates, Gassy Sobdar played an important role in the history of Muslims in Mauritius. He was in fact, I have been told, the first Imam of the first mosque of the island, now known as Al-Aqsa Mosque, which was built in 1805 during the French colonial rule. Allow me to highlight that another member of the Sobdar family, late Haji Imam Bakr Sobdar, became the first Imam of the second mosque, Juma Masjid, from 1855 to 1865. How can I forget late Bibi Sakina Gulamali, the maternal grandmother of Gassy Sobdar, a strong woman, I have been told, who played a significant role in the cultural and religious empowerment of the Muslim community, again during the French colonial rule. In fact, she made such a significant contribution to our country that when she died at the age of 112 in 1809, she was buried in the compound of the mosque, a rare privilege that is not granted to everyone. These emblematic figures and many others have had an immense contribution to shaping our destiny and building the Mauritian Rainbow Nation. Thanks to Mr. Bhuglah's book, we can all learn more about them. In fact, understanding their hard work and accomplishment will only make us prouder of our heritage. It is my sincere hope that our youth will be encouraged to learn from the past and consequently do their best in continuing to preserve our heritage. Now allow me to share with you a quote by Charles W. Eliot, American academic, about the value of books. I quote, "Books are the quietest and most constant of friends. They are the most accessible and wisest of counselors and the most patient of teachers." Unquote. Mr. Bhuglah, you are to be congratulated for the valuable work you have done over the years. I'm sure you will continue. I'm sure you will continue to please us with your writing in the years to come. Thank you very much.
And a privilege for me to participate in the launch of the book entitled Gassy Sobdar, and the pioneering Lascar of the 18th and the 19th century Mauritius, written by our brother Assad Bhuglah. I have known Assad for a long time now. He is one of the very few Mauritian authors who is striving to keep the history of our ancestors alive through his research, studies, and publication. I would like to seize this opportunity to thank Assad for this kind invitation, and at the same time commend him for devoting his time and energy to bring to the attention of the general public the contribution of the Muslim to the development of Mauritius in its different fields. Personally, I have always been keen and enthusiastic to learn the historical processes, contribution and construction of the Mauritian society, and the contribution of the Muslim community, especially. This book will provide us with the opportunity to understand the Muslim presence in Mauritius. It will also help the young generation to learn how our ancestors sacrificed themselves to preserve their identity and culture. Assad's book is an important contribution to the promotion and preservation of our folklore, history, literature, and cultural heritage. Gassy Sobdar and the pioneering Lascar of the 18th and the 19th centuries Mauritius will contribute to fill the historical gap that existed when we discuss the early 18th and 19th century. It fills in the many missing links in understanding the trajectory of the Lascar and how they evolved constructively and positively in the evolution of a multi-ethnic and multicultural society that is we have in Mauritius today. Being myself a native of Plainvert, which as you all know previously known as County Lascar, I'm pleased to read about the leap forward undertaken by the early Lascar, in particular Imam Gassy Sobdar in the construction and development of Port Louis and of Mauritius in general. Despite living on an isolated island, the Muslims of County Lascar were very connected to the Ottomans. As the Sultan was the Caliph of the Muslim world at that time, had a say in the appointment of the Imam, that is the Muslim priest, across the Muslim world. According to official record, the appointment of Gassy Sobdar as the first Muslim priest of Al-Aqsa Mosque was endorsed by the Ottoman ruler in 1859. As far as Al-Aqsa Mosque is concerned, I'm glad that this historical 216 years old edifice has been classified as a National Heritage Monument in 2016. Two other historical sites which are very dear to us and which need to be rehabilitated and preserved are firstly the cemetery at Rissalin, where Imam Gassy Sobdar is buried, and secondly, Point de Lascar, where a dozen of our ancestors who perished in a shipwreck and were buried on the beach of Point de Lascar in the 1700s. Ladies and gentlemen, viewing the arrival of immigrants from a larger perspective, there are solid historical evidence that proves the presence of Indian sailors known as Lascar on the island since 1735. They were brought by Governor Mahendra to help in the task of building the harbour of Port Louis, where the basic maritime infrastructure bears their footprints. They settled in the eastern suburb of Port Louis, known as County Lascar, which is today Plainvert. As you all know, several streets in Plainvert still bear the name of towns and cities of southern India, where these immigrants originated, namely Calicut, Goa, Malabar Street, Hyderabad, Madurai, Maharashtra, Bombay, Madras, and Calicut, just to name just a few. There is evidence that during the French colonial rule, many Muslims, despite having lost their cultural roots, managed to preserve, in some measure, their religious identity. The Lascars used to manifest their religious identity as Muslim through the yearly celebration of the Yansih, a popular procession that marks the tragedy of Karbala in present-day Iraq, where Hussein, the grandson of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companion were martyred. Although many of the practice and the rites around this local event would not fit in the mainstream of Islam, yet the Yansih served as a platform for the Lascar to keep themselves together as a religious group, and thus minimize the risk of being assimilated in the ways and in lifestyle of the dominant society in the country. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last few years, there has been increased consciousness on the history of the Muslim in Mauritius. I'm just going to name just a few. It's what has been mentioned before, been written by the writers in the last few years. Firstly, we have the history of the Al-Aqsa Mosque itself. Dr. Idris Kumaini, mentioned before. Mandari again by Assad Bhuglah. Plein dans le temps by Lukman Lalmamoud. Muslim Escalade by Mona Fatira, which was launched on last week. And tomorrow we'll have another launch by Ade and Kawa and Kawali Basic in Mauritius. This is very encouraging. It's a very encouraging trend. I hope more and more young people will be interested and continue to research and publish the history of the Muslim community in Mauritius. There's a lot of information in the national archives in Mauritius and overseas as well. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that context. Before I resume my seat, ladies and gentlemen, let me congratulate Assad Bhuglah again for coming up with a book on the untrodden chapter on our history. After his work on the life of Dr. Idris Kumaini in 2017, which was followed by drama in Creole in 2018 on the same personality and with his signature. Well, keep it up, brother. Thanks very much.
I shall start with an apology. You are going to hear exactly what others have spoken before me. I have a prepared speech. Unfortunately, I'm the fourth or the fifth to speak, and they have said everything that I had to say. So bear with me. I'm going to use my own words, of course, and say probably exactly what you have said, what you have heard. My apology, and thank you, Finlay, for this very nice introduction. We have been together for long enough now to know that you are a Creole and a Lascar. I am particularly honored, ladies and gentlemen, to be associated with the launch of the book Gassy Sobdar and the Pioneering Lascar of 18th and 19th centuries Mauritius. The more so, as I had the privilege of writing the foreword to the book and was therefore given to read the manuscript before it went to press. I discovered a well-written and a well-researched book of priceless historical value by a talented author, Assad Bhuglah, both an eclectic and a prolific writer. Assad Bhuglah is a regular correspondent of the weekly The Star and other local written press, and his writings denote an interest in a vast, multifarious range of subjects, from economics and international trade to art and literature, from current affairs to historical events, with a special penchant for Islamic civilization and culture. Since his retirement as a senior civil servant in 2016, he has authored several publications, as Finlay Savès has said, First, a book of the life of Dr. Idris Amir Goumani, the forgotten hero of Mauritius, the Camp Lascar born and Scotland trained first Mauritian doctor of Indian origin in the second half of the 19th century, who sacrificed himself when all others refused to do so, and gave up his life at the prime of his youth. He was barely 30, while treating patients with the highly contagious smallpox disease at the quarantine center in Puerto Canonier, now Club Med Hotel, where he is buried. He fell victime du devoir. Assad Bhuglah also written 3 plays, one in Creole of the same Dr. Goumani, the second one entitled Pandari, a central figure of la cuisine, of the kitchen, I mean, especially commissioned for biryani parties, some sort of an oriental cordon bleu chef. And the third one, Akika, a Thanksgiving ceremony or ritual on the birth of a child, usually accompanied with the inevitable biryani. He also authored a short novel, as you've heard, Beyond the Ocean, Love Without Frontiers. I thought I would be revealing a secret, but Finley has already informed you that Assad Bhuglah is working on the biography of Dr. Hassanji Jummai, the first Muslim laureate, English scholarship winner, and founder in 1949 of the Islamic Cultural College. At this rate, Assad will soon become our accredited national biographer. With Gassy Sobdar and the pioneering Lascars of the 18th and 19th centuries Mauritius, Assad Bhuglah has unearthed the forgotten story of yet another hero. Known as the Grand Prêtre, Gassy Sobdar was the first imam of the Camp Lascar Mosque, known today as Al-Aqsa. While researching the life of Gassy Sobdar, the author was so struck and impressed by the foolhardiness of the pioneering Lascar, who brought in from India in the early days of the French colonization, especially as shipbuilders, port workers, and seamen, braved it out on their own to keep alive their religious beliefs and practices, that he decided to dig further into the lives of some of the most famous names of the time, and thus included in his book, Gassy Sobdar, brief notes on 8 such prominent families, which the author mentioned in his speech. Notes that I'm sure would leave you all asking for more. They were, I repeat, the Sakir family with Dr. Hassan Sakir, the physician, the first Indo-Mauritian politician of Muslim faith, to be elected municipal councillor and a nominated member of the then Council of Government, and his academically successful brothers, the Jinnah family, descendants of the Maharaja of Lahore, Lador, the African Lascar, an iconic sword dancing figure in all annual Goon festivals, the Goumani family and their martyred son, Dr. Idris Amir, the Kajinush, closely associated with Al-Aqsa Mosque in its early days, and among the first civil servants of Indian origin, the Qasim family of aristocratic lineage and upbringing, the Abdullah, one of the rare Lascar originating from Kerala, with the most popular Goon organizer of his time, affectionately known as Bhai Abdu, and the Badula family of Sri Lankan origin, experts in tea plantation. Those families have all, in their own way, kept the spiritual strain of their religion burning and contributed to ensuring the survival of their community in an at times unfriendly environment. Gassy Sobdar, born in 1791 of Omani ancestry, had a sound Islamic upbringing under the care of Bibi Sakina Ghulam, his maternal grandmother, who died at the advanced age of 112, fondly remembered today as Daddy, and was buried within the precincts of the Camp de Lascar Mosque in the shade of the champa tree with its beautifully white fragrant flowers, filling with a nice smell the whole environment that I still remember enjoying when as a youngster I used to attend prayer at the mosque, which was at a stone's throw from where I lived with my parents for over a quarter of a century until the late 1960s. Gassy Sobdar was to play a prominent role both as Imam and administrative head of the Camp de Lascar Mosque and the de facto leader of the nascent Muslim community. He was married to Eugène de Senneville, who took the Muslim name of Assenbi, and they had 3 children. Gassy Sobdar was a strict disciplinarian who strove to maintain unity within the community made up of people of different backgrounds and encouraged the secular education of the children and their smooth integration into the wider multi-ethnic society. He was respected for his noble and distinguished ancestry, and wearing, like his father, the Omani turban, his demeanor, behavior, and smartness never went unnoticed. It is surmised, I say it is surmised, that the improbable romantic idyll between Gassy Sobdar and Eugène de Senneville, a meeting of the East and the West, started at the Pamplemousses garden, where the special envoys of the Tipu Sultan of Mysore were staying at the Chateau du Mont-Plaisir. And a few members of the Senneville family and the Sobdar family happened, for different reasons, to be part of the reception committee. The smart, young Sobdar caught the eyes of Eugénie, and as the story or the legend goes, they got married and lived happily ever after. When Gassy Sobdar was growing up, Camp de Lascar, now Plaine was the residential zone assigned to the Lascar and other ethnic Indian groups. It is there that in the year 1805, the Lascar propriétaires were granted by the French Governor General Charles Ducamp, and after several unsuccessful petitions and failed attempts, the concession of a plot of land of an extent of 260 toises et 4 pieds carrés for the sum of 215 francs 5 centimes to put up the first ever mosque built in Mauritius and known today as Al-Aqsa, as I said earlier on. Until then, the private and public practice of faiths other than Catholicism was prohibited and considered illegal. Nevertheless, according to researcher Muslim Jumir, the Lascar had been well before secretly offering prayer in congregation in what he termed une mosquée case, mosquée la case, not far from where would rise years later the Camp de Lascar Mosque, the mother of all our mosques, recently included in the list of our natural heritage sites. Gassy Sobdar will be called to serve as the first Imam of the mosque, and on his death in 1861, at the age of 70, he will be succeeded by Imam Maurice Info. Until the early 1960s, Al-Aqsa was the only mosque that served Muslims living in the eastern suburb of Port and beyond, and was commonly known as Masjid. The Jummah Mosque of Royal Street became later the Grand Masjid. Over the years, the praying space of the Masjid has kept on expanding with the addition of several extensions to the original building to accommodate the growing number of worshippers. However, the original structure, including the mihrab, that is the semi-circular niche in the wall of the mosque that indicates this direction of the Kaaba in Mecca, has been preserved, resulting in the mosque's unique feature of having 2 mihrabs. At the dawn of the British colonization that witnessed since 1834 an upsurge of Indian immigrants recruited to work as indentured laborers in the sugarcane fields, mostly in the rural areas of the country, and among whom many were of Islamic faith. It was not common for them, I wrote some time back, an author in a local newspaper, it was not uncommon for them, while in Portruy, on errands or for other personal reasons, to pause for rest in the Glenvale garden, sitting on one of the benches or lying under a banyan tree, and afterwards offering prayer at the Tea Masjid, where Gassy Sobdar was probably already officiating. On their very first contact with the local Lascar, those new immigrants were intrigued with several aspects of those Indian-looking people who appeared to them to have lost their Indianness. Their Creole culture and way of life, the language they spoke with strong Creole intonation, and their strange French-sounding names, Kadiouche for Hazi Yunus, Ignace for Ilyas, Mahmoud for Mahmoud, Gassy for Ghazi, simply baffled them. And most of the latter's women folk, unlike those of the Indian laborers, were dressed the Western way, with a neckerchief often leisurely worn around the neck and shoulder, and occasionally used as headscarf. It was from that time that the Lascar earned the nickname of Creole Lascar, doubly pejorative in those days, although others attribute the nickname Creole Lascar to the fact that many of the prominent Lascar of those days married Creole girls, and Creole découvert filmé. It is to those Creole Lascar the Muslims owe a debt of gratitude for keeping the interesting and practice of Islam alive in Mauritius. We must, however, also concede that they brought along with them some of the folkloric aspects of Islam, as it was practiced in those parts of India where they lived. One striking example is the annual festival during the first 10 days of the Islamic month of Muharram, called Yamse, better known as Gun. It comprised a procession with a display of richly decorated cenotaphs called tazia, and the loud chanting of religious songs by the devotees, often resorting to self-inflicted stab wounds by means of some rudimentary spears that they wielded, accompanied with a beating of drums. Over the years, it took the form of an annual festivity, drawing large crowds of people of the various communities and creeds, making of it a carnival-like event with all the fun of the fair. Today, a few descendants of the first Lascar of Mauritius, including the Sobdar family, still maintain the tradition and organize the Gun as their ancestors used to, although the popular fervor is no longer present, as such practice is more vociferously decried these days by the Orthodox Sunni Muslims. Assad Bughlah's research has revealed a number of untold stories around the legendary figure of Gassy Sobdar. There are still many more historical figures among the early settlers who, for some iniquitous and mysterious reasons, have remained shrouded in a fog that needs to be cleared. It can be therefore safely assumed that for Assad Bhuglah, Gassy Sobdar, and the pioneering Lascar of 18th and 19th century Mauritius is not the end of the road. To conclude, I wish to wholeheartedly commend Assad Bhuglah for publishing his book that is being launched today, an essential historical document that should have a pride place in everyone's book collection. And I thank you very much for your attention.
I don't know, being the sixth speaker, I wanted, while listening to everybody, I wanted to say that everything has been said before, even some everything are said. So So very difficult for me to make the speech that I've prepared. But I'm very pleased to assist myself with the launching ceremony of the new book of Assad Bhuglah, entitled Gassy Sobdar and the Pioneering Lascar of 18th and 19th century Mauritius. The title of the book already gives us an idea of the historical context, time period, the protagonist of the book. The author has made tremendous effort and in-depth research to appraise us of interesting features of our local history and patrimony that are unknown or little known to many of us. He shares with us things that he has observed from his perspective and from his social, cultural lens. I have known Assad Bhuglah when he was director of the International Trade. When he was director of the International Trade at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Assad has been a refined trade diplomat. He represented Mauritius in important regional and international meetings and has staunchly promoted and defended the interests of Mauritius during negotiations at the WTO and for agreements such as AGOA, the SADC Trade Protocol, the Commissar Free Trade Area, and the Interim Economic Partnership Agreement with the European Union. During his send-off party for his retirement, the then Minister of Foreign Affairs, Honorable Vishnu Naidu, hailed him as a person of great humanity and great culture. After his retirement, we have discovered another great dimension of Assad Bhuglah, who is evolving as a passionate writer on various topics of Mauritian folklore, traditions, cultural heritage, and history. His works, I will not enumerate his works because that has been said I think 4 times before, but this particular venture to make an abstraction is to a large extent a reflection of the métissage and a cultural melting point of an emerging society of every immigrant who laid the foundation of Mauritius. Gassy Sobdar, the protagonist in the book, epitomizes diverse origins. His mental grandmother, as was said by Mr. Bhuglah before. His grandmother was a noble woman of Lascar descended from India. His father was a Gazi from Oman. His wife was a colored woman, fathered by a Franco-Russian aristocrat. And his adopted father was Ina Sobdar, a high official of the Tamil background in the French colonial administration. This book speaks about half a dozen prominent Lascar families who left their imprint in the development of Mauritius. I will not speak again of Dr. Bhuglah, which surely I will have the opportunity to speak by the beginning of the next one. Dr. Sakir, Mr. Dina, the Katim family. I will not speak about all that because everybody here has already heard. The book is embellished by rare photos and rare documents retrieved from family archives, and also several small paintings of artist Nasrin Baba. I take this opportunity to commend the Petrus Mox Library for giving a platform to Mauritian authors to promote their writing. Now, I will take this opportunity to thank all Mauritians for taking their time to write books, to keep us abreast of what's going on in Mauritius. But more and so, I think that it's very important to congratulate those persons like Mr. Bhuglah who are devoting their time to write books, to go and make researches. And we all know how difficult it is in Mauritius to retrieve information. There are certain events that we hear has happened in Mauritius, But when we want to go to retrieve those information, it appears that as the same in French, les gens, very often when people are doing researches like in slavery and so on, it appears to us that, oh, was that true? Because we don't have any of record of what happened. We don't have those things. So I think that it is very important for us to help those people like Mr. Bhuglah. In fact, you know, today I've learned many things. I have learned many things about the Lascars in Port-Louis. Because you know, I was living in Bhuglah, and my neighbors was a Biari family, big family, and I even attended courses by a Miyaji, who came in the house to teach Arabic to people. But you know, I was so afraid of that Miyaji that I made École Buissonnière, and fortunately for me, I made École de Chauffeur. Afterwards, I was living in Ménil, and in Ménil, most of my friends were from this school, Lascar. And I was very pleased to hear Hassan when he said, my friend Lascar and my friend Creole. Because you know, they were not calling me Creole also, but I was called Milat. I was called Milat. So all those things, we have to keep that for the next generation. So I will take this opportunity because you know, art and culture ne peuvent pas nourrir quelqu'un à Maurice, parce que Maurice est un petit pays. Nous prenons par exemple quelqu'un qui fait un spectacle, c'est sûr qu'il va à un échec financier. Très peu d'artistes à Maurice peuvent dire qu'ils peuvent vivre de l'art et de la culture. Prenons l'exemple, lorsque nous regardons la télévision, nous voyons que quelqu'un peut faire un spectacle devant 100 000 personnes, 200 000 personnes. Mais nous, à Maurice, est-ce possible? So, nous avons besoin de beaucoup de courage, beaucoup de persévérance. Et nous, ici, je vois aujourd'hui le nombre de personnes ici présentes m'encourage, me donne l'espoir que à Maurice, donne l'espoir au gouvernement que à Maurice, l'art et la culture are connected. I'm sure Mrs. Bhuglah works will be an enrichment to the Mauritian literature and history. Thank you, Assad, for educating us about our past and contributing to exchange of information and ideas that are very important to nation building in a multicultural society. I wish you a successful launch, and I take this opportunity to launch